Death Battle's back, baby. And man, they're starting. They're playing to my heart. Oh, they're pulling the strings. They're pulling the cockles of my heart. We're starting the year with Ichigo versus Yusuke Urameshi. This thumbnail, by the way, was made by Saber Lily. I believe Saber Lily 15 was it? Just giving the shout out, so I'm not getting in trouble for using it. But yeah, look, they've had Ichigo on here once. They've had Bleach on here twice. We've had Yu on here once. Now we're getting two things I grew up Toonami watching Yu Yu Hakusho. Bleach I actually had to get into. I did get into Bleach through, I believe it was Toonami, but I ultimately then started reading it on my own and all that. And as I've stated multiple times, huge Bleach fans, my favorite of the big three. But it makes sense why you would actually put these two together. They're two street punks, kind of. Not street punk. Ichigo's definitely a punk, but in a different way. One guy actually takes his education seriously, the other doesn't. But they're two punk kids, kind of ruffians, who ultimately have, special heritage, end up dying temporarily in some fashion, end up fighting spirit worlds, and there's spirits, demons, all that, and there's a spirit world of some kind. There's an afterlife, and yeah, they do share a lot in terms of similarities. Okay, so I have said on multiple occasions whenever we talk about Death Battle and Bleach that Death Battle does not seem to understand how Bleach first scales. And I stand by that. I am also surprised that we are getting this first when the 1,000-Year Blood War arc still has to finish up this year. I thought if we were getting this, I would have thought maybe we were getting it after the 1,000-Year Blood War arc wraps up. But I guess we're not, which is fine. Okay, fine. My question is, have they gotten their scaling finally correct? Have they finally learned how to properly scale Bleach? Or is this going to be a Naruto versus Ichigo? A Madara versus Aizen? Where their rationale for the scaling made absolutely no fucking sense. And people, you might say, oh, he's a hater. Oh, he's such a Bleach glazer. It's like, no. Straight out. They have never figured, for whatever reason, do not know how to interpret the scaling of Bleach. Because Bleach's cosmology is completely different than any of the other big three. So, here's the thing. I don't care if Yusuke wins, per se. I just want to be sure that when he does win, if he wins, that the scaling, that they figured out a way to scale him above Ichigo in a way that isn't just ass pulling. That's my problem. Because honestly, legit, Ichigo, by all accounts, should wreck Yusuke in a fight. He should absolutely wreck his ass in a fight. Here's how I want to break this down. Physically, hand to hand, Yusuke is a fantastic fighter. But so we undervalue the fact that Ichigo can beat Tatsuki in hand to hand, who is a martial arts champion in her own right. Now, that being said, Yusuke's beaten straight martial arts with street fighting, all that. I'd say it's probably a wash in hand to hand. Okay, fair enough. But Ichigo's really not a hand to hand fighter when it comes to being a Shinigami. He's a swordsman. And in that realm, Yusuke doesn't have a freaking leg to stand on. Like, weaponry to weaponry, Ichigo's got to beat there. What about techniques? Well, Ichigo's got the spirit gun, shotgun, spirit wave. Ichigo actually doesn't have a lot going for it. Ichigo is a fighter with his fists. He is a brawler. I mean, he's a street fighter, but he's a brawler. A brawler who's been taught by martial artists. He still fights kind of more like a brawler, but he is a brawler with technique. But that's it. He's really just hand-to-hand fighting. That's all he is. Ichigo can fight hand-to-hand if he needs to, but he can also fight with his blades. He's also gets a Katenju, gets a good Jujutsu. We still do not know how powerful his Bankai is, which is why doing this before the final season does rub me just a little bit the wrong way. Not that I think we'd really see much of what his Bankai could do. But then we get into the real crux of the argument about who should win the fight: the scaling, their Ryatsu and spiritual power energy levels. That's what it comes down to. And obviously, Yusuke should be able to see Ichigo no problem. That's fine. Yusuke, as far as I know, also doesn't have the ability to pop his soul out of his body like Hiei and Kurama do. But even if he did, Ichigo could just literally kill at that, so that wouldn't work. Okay, here's the scaling problem. If we actually stop and think about the scaling of the Bleach world and the Yu Yu Hakusho world, so we know that Yusuke could blow up the planet Earth. We know that. That's stated, he could blow up the planet Earth. He cannot, however, blow up the demon world on his own. They even said the foundations of the demon world are just larger. Now, the demon world, though, is similar to that of the Soul Society. It's a different dimension. It's not a planet in the conventional sense. It's an extra dimension. And should note too that it doesn't have the same cosmology as something like Earth. It doesn't seem to have atmosphere or like a sun or it doesn't really do night very much, or sun or night a day there very much. I mean, it does kind of. Like, is there night and day in Demon World? That's actually a question I should just say. Is there night and day in Demon World? Is there a sun in the Demon World? Yu Yu Hakusho. Yu Yu Hakusho. Okay. Is there a sun in the Demon World? Yes, the Yu Yu Hakusho. Yes, the Demon World has a sun and experiences day and night cycle. Though the sky often appears crimson with dark clouds, and in Series Ed, he is shown watching the sunset, indicating indicating a natural celestial body despite the world's demonic nature. And you can actually, all right. That does help. That does help this argument for Yusuke then. But the problem here is actually still problematic for Yusuke, or in this question, because he can't actively destroy. How big is the Demon World too? How big is the Demon World? How big is the Demon World in Yu Yu Hakusho? The Demon World is portrayed as astronomically vast, potentially infinite, and much larger than the human world, with different layers, depths, where power increases the deeper you go. That right there. That is the one scaling argument that I could see in favor of Yusuke, is the alleged near infinite levels of the Demon World. Because when they does that diagram of the Demon World, it's displayed kind of like literally like layers. But the question is, how do you access those layers? What's problematic though for Yusuke is that we know he can't destroy, as far as we know, he can't destroy the Demon World on his own power. All right, so let's hold on that for a second. Let's now talk about Yusuke and Bleach. In Bleach, there are 3 core dimensions, let's call them. Dimensions, worlds, whatever. Hell is separate. It is a separate thing. There's also the Dangai Precipice that has technically connect the worlds in some ways. And there's also the Valley of Screens. But right now we're focusing on the big 3. Each and every one of those is depicted. Here's the problem with DeathBattle. They depicted those as planets. Why? Why are they planets? They're not planets. They're dimensions and existences. They're separate realities. And they're of equal size to each other, hence the balance. Now, this is important because we have to assume that the Bleach human world cosmology is the same as ours. There's just no reason to assume otherwise. That it has planet Earth, the sun, the moon, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter. It has its solar system. It has all that. And we know for a fact that the Soul Society has a sun and a night and stars. So we have to assume and therefore we have to assume Hueco Mundo, which is in a perpetual state of night, admittedly. But in terms of size, is the same as them. We have to assume that their cosmologies work the same way. So that means that's 3 different realities that each function as their own separate universe. At minimum, solar system, but universe. Let's lowball the universe. But you also got to factor in dimensions as a whole. Think of when they talked about Kyle versus Simone. they talked about differences in dimensions and how it's like infinite levels between each one. And to get there is very difficult between each one. Like that's how dimensional beings work. Well, Ichigo is tapped to be a Soul King candidate, a being which literally has the capability, even as the Soul King's weakest, most cut up version of himself, to hold 3 separate realities together. And Ichigo doesn't quite actually scale to the Soul King, but he's dangerous and strong enough to threaten someone like Yuaba, who absorbed the remains of the Soul King, who has the Almighty. Not great with the Almighty. He was whipping Ichigo, but that's a different thing entirely. We're talking about the scale of the level of their power output, their energy level, all that. And yeah, we're talking about someone who scales as one of the strongest characters in their verse. Most likely, he did surpass someone like Yamamoto, who literally could burn down the entirety of his dimension with his Zanpakuto. So we actually don't have a firm idea of where Ichigo, a firm answer of where Ichigo truly scales, but we can assume he's in that ballpark. He's comparable to someone like Aizen. He's dangerous enough for Yuaba to be threatened by. So we just have to generally assume he is in that range. Like, he theoretically has the power, if he needed to destroy one of these realms of reality in just raw power alone. He scales above Shutaru, Senjumaru Shutara, the Royal Guard, who used her Bankai, and just activating it shook 3 different realities. So we have one case of someone who has to go to a world of infinite dimensions to fight, otherwise, lest he threaten the human world. And then we have someone who, and don't forget that things like Mukin exist within the Soul Society, which is an infinite dimension in and of itself. And so if he would destroy that, that means that he's destroying more than just that. But let's look at just the base feats right now. Or do we have the guy whose power is enough to threaten 3 whole realities that are at least solar system level in capability and size? And I would lean towards the latter. I'd lean towards Ichigo. Like, the scaling, Bleach's overall scaling just comes off as larger. The only real impressive scaling we get for Yu Yu Hakusho in terms of, like, real scaling is that statement about the demon world's layers and how maybe individuals affect the world of the demon world. Like, I think Yusuke and Yomi were, like, shaking the foundations of the demon world. So, in theory, they were shaking an infinite void, but they weren't destroying it on their own power. Whereas someone like Ichigo could, in theory, destroy it on their own power, given who he scales to, which is what DeathBattle would do here. So Ichigo, and that's not even going into things like speed feats, which Ichigo hit light speed early on in the series. Whereas, assuming we're using like Spirit Gun as a benchmark for, say, light speed feats, and comparing to someone like Hiei and all that, then I would assume Yusuke also has light speed level feats, but just not at the same level. Look, I'm gonna go Ichigo on this. Call me a Bleach Glazer if you want. Call me a whatever. I love Yu Yu Hakusho. I do. I grew up on that shit, man. But the Bleach universe just scales higher. It just does, in my opinion. And if someone maybe has a better, then look, I'm willing to be proven wrong. I am willing to watch that fight, have Yusuke win, look at him win, and as long as their explanation actually makes sense, I'll be happy. So long as they don't freaking they don't hobble the Bleach scale. Because so far, they are 2 for 2 in bad Bleach research. They are. In terms of overall power and strength. So, yeah. Let me know in the comments below who you got, why you got them. If you think if you think there's some actual feats for Yu Yu Hakusho scaling above Bleach, let me know in terms of the overall. Because that's the thing. Demon world is not equal to the human world in this equation. It's not. And there's only 2 worlds. That's the other thing. I mean, there is an afterlife, so technically there is 3 worlds, but they're not the same type. It's not the same type of cosmology as Bleach. So yeah, let me know what you think. Put in the comments below. Let's be respectful, by the way. I have my opinion. I might be wrong, by the way. I could very well be wrong. But let's just try to have a friendly debate. By the way, if you're someone who says you can't, since I have this moment to just bring it up, I did my whole video of the death battles for that recently came out and ranked them, and someone basically just said, all right. He gave a good score to two people. Basically said that the Bardock versus Omni-Man fight was terrible. One person just said that. I'm like, okay, that's fair. The other person said, I immediately can't take this person seriously. You can go away. Like, you clear, because that tells me unless someone agrees with your opinion, you don't care about, you just want an echo chamber. That's all that, if you're telling me you can't take someone's opinion seriously because they disagree with you, then you just want an echo chamber, and I don't want you here. Bye. Anyway, I digress. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.